and welcome back to Coach Quip. I'm Coach Robyn.
I'm Coach Chris.
And today, this is episode 146. We are talking about time trials.
Yes, time trials. So when it comes to endurance sports, doesn't matter, running, cycling, swimming, whatever it is that you're doing, the key to making progress is really in consistent training, in focus training. And the way that we can do that is by having accurate pace cards and guidelines for our training. So today we're going to be talking about time trials. And when we're talking about time trials today, time trials can be two things. It can be a race situation. So benchmarking through a 5K or a 10K can help you get those paces for your running plan coming up. So if you're doing marathon training, doing one at the beginning is a good way to sort of set the groundwork. But in terms of time trials today, we're going to be talking about it more as an individual non-race effort. So time trial is really a race against the clock, and it can be over a set distance or time. What sort of time trials do you typically have people do in our group training?
Yeah, for swimming, we don't really go through all the sports. For swimming, we'll typically do like a T-pace set where they're doing like 15 100s, for instance, and that you take kind of the average of those 15 100s with a periodized rest to come up with that T-pace, which is your threshold pace. For cycling, it's usually an FTP test or a functional threshold test. Those literally happen right here where we're sitting right now in the bike room. That's usually a 1 by 20 minute test, all out effort, so similar to like a 5K intensity. And then for running, I mean, it can be anything. I personally love, for my personal coached athletes, I'll do a 2 mile or a 10-minute time trial, and that you get some really great data extrapolated from that, and it also doesn't leave like so much of a mark. But I gotta tell you, if they're racing like a full marathon, I would almost rather them time trial a 10K or a half, especially as we get closer to the race, because that is the distance is closer to the distance they're racing, so you're getting more accurate information.
Right. Yeah, so unlike a race situation, this is something that you really have to pace yourself. And in our situation in like group training, athletes will do time trials with other people, but it doesn't have that sort of race environment where everything is amped up. You have the adrenaline. Certainly there's some adrenaline, but it's a little bit different. So this is a self-powered, time trials are self-powered for you to find your personal best. And, this really, it strips away that outside environment, the people cheering, some of those things that can boost you on race day. I would also say is something that should probably be done without music. It's really something that you want.
Ooh, that's a hot tip. I like that.
Really something that you want to see how deep you can dig in that situation to get some numbers. And at the end of the time trial, the goal is that you'll have new data to apply to a pace card so that you'll have that accurate pace chart to do the rest of your speed work through your training cycle.
What do you use for a pace calculator or to create those pace charts?
I typically use the Macmillan calculator, which is free online, and that tends to be pretty good. But I do tweak it, and for some of my athletes, I've been giving them a range instead of a pace. So about a 10 to 15 second range to sort of shoot for. And some of that I actually have been using off of the edge pace chart. Between, if I know somebody tends to lean a little bit more speed monster than endurance, then I'll tailor it. Yes,
cool.
Exactly.
That's very cool.
And what about you?
I use McRun. I like the app.
Okay.
Because it's green and real pretty. I like that you have a lot of options for the distances again. So if we are doing a 2 mile, it extrapolates a little more smoothly. I do like VDOT online. I don't use it as much, but it's a little bit more aggressively paced too. So I tend to use it with my more like intermediate advanced runners.
Yeah, and then for cycling, I typically use either Joe Friel.
Same.
Or we'll use the Sufferfest.
Oh yeah, you've said that.
Yeah, the Sufferfest had a nice FTP chart that I just have print-offs of, and it's just, I think that one is a little more common of percentages of the FTP. For some reason, that one seems easier to figure out than running sometimes.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And then for swimming?
I honestly just use the T-pace as the threshold pace, so you don't have to extrapolate all that much, because that just then feeds into heart rate zones.
Right. Yeah, and that can be confusing.
So obviously there are going to be some benefits to time trialing, right? First up is going to be, it's a pretty accurate performance assessment. You can really take a snapshot of your current fitness level. You can track your progress over time, especially with a lot of the shorter distances. I mean, you can honestly do these like once a month and get really cool data points. And you can identify your strengths and your weaknesses. So that way, if you're bombing at 5K time trials, but you did a really great job at the half, chances are you probably need to dial up your speed work a little bit more because it's just not translating that way. So it allows you to tailor and kind of know how to go forward.
Yeah. Next benefit is mental toughness. So, doing a solo effort really is mentally challenging. Even if you're doing it with other people that need to push yourself without the sort of carrot, I guess, of the medal at the end, can be really, really challenging. So you have to push yourself without that immediate competition around. And this can really help you in actual races, because if you can survive a hard effort, and especially a hard effort that's not 800 or mile repeat, like something that's a little bit longer, and really have to put yourself into that pain cave, it can make a big difference on race day.
Yeah, it really can. They're very vulnerable. I give athletes a ton of credit that do these on their own. I will typically write these in Q1 early, Q2 of a year, because there's just not as much racing opportunity for my personally coached athletes. And it's daunting. They're like, oh my gosh, I have a 2-mile time trial on a Tuesday. I'm like, yeah, but then when you do it, you feel really, really good about yourself because you did it. I mean, that's like, what'd you do on Tuesday? Oh, just a 2-mile time trial solo while I threshold lined it myself. It's a big deal.
Yeah, I had an athlete in early spring who did a 5K time trial on the 606 and threw down, and I was so impressed. I mean, to me, that was a greater effort than any race that he had done.
That's super cool.
Because to be able to empty the tank like that by yourself just says so much about him and his mental toughness.
And it's a skill. Like, it takes, I think the first time they do it, they're like, oh, that was wild. I can do it better next time, right? And then they get better at that, which in turn just feeds into racing.
Yes, it is a skill that can be developed by consistently doing it.
All right. Number 3, the third benefit is really helping with your pacing strategy. So you have to understand how to pace yourself, and not just at one distance. This is like where all of the finesse comes in, right? They basically give you a controlled environment. It's safe. You do it when you want to do it. And by doing that, you can actually figure out how to refine your pacing by hitting the numbers, as well as a strategy in terms of how do you try to make it, regressive or flat. I would never really recommend you making it progressive. Right? Over time, you're going to learn how to, distribute that effort more evenly, which really, when it comes to your other workouts or actual in a racing environment, it's just going to allow you to be more familiar with that.
Yeah, that said, I would say it's really important to do time trials as runners outside.
Yeah, whenever possible.
So, if you are on the treadmill, we can certainly touch some speed and dial in stronger paces there. But the part about the time trialing is really controlling your body's effort. And on a treadmill, that thing is moving underneath you. So I would really recommend that people go outside for these. And, it's a little bit different. So cycling, for an FTP test, that's self-powered. In the pool, that's self-powered. You are swimming. So it's a little different on the treadmill. And to your point, I think this is where athletes can really lock in those paces and learn a lot about themselves and what it feels like to self-power those, especially if they've been on the treadmill all winter long.
Yeah.
Number 4 is simulation of race conditions. So time trials can really mimic those race conditions and give you an opportunity to practice everything from your nutrition strategy before, during, and after your race, all the way through to that pacing. And it helps to reduce the sort of race day anxiety. Don't get us wrong. Seeing a time trial on your plan can certainly cause some anxiety.
Y'all should probably look, because there's some on there.
I was like, are you getting text messages yet?
Not yet. They haven't figured it out yet.
Well, it's coming, friends. That's why we're doing this episode. So, to be able to manage that anxiety can really help you on race day, as we mentioned, and it helps you get a little bit more familiar with the tools that you have already that can help you sort of quiet that anxiety. And that, I think, is one of the biggest benefits of a time trial is then when you show up on race day, you already have that workout in the bank.
Yeah.
And you can go back to your training journal and see what you did and how it went. And the strategies that sort of help to calm you down during that time trial can apply to race day.
It is exposure therapy. Brian used to race bikes, and he was a crit cyclist, which is, you're going in a tight format. It's, he's very skilled. He's very athletically gifted, but when he first started racing, training was no problem, right? But when he first started racing, for the most part, he was racing on the weekends, and he would get so anxious. I don't think I was living here, so I didn't get to see it so much in person, but he would tell me, I literally didn't sleep at all, but then he'd race and do really well. The only way it got better is, I don't think they have as many now, but there used to be weekday racing, just south of the city. And it was every week, and he would go and enter those. And that's kind of like a time trial, in that it is a much more informal kind of gathering, because it was around a paint plant. It wasn't an actual race course, but people showed up and by doing that, weekly or bi-weekly, he then all of a sudden was this weekend don't seem so scary anymore. And he was able to perform kind of even better and sleep and repair and start ticking those boxes. But it really took him doing a lot more than just showing up for races.
Yeah, and especially for some of us who race so infrequently, if you only have 3 or 4 races on your calendar, of course you're going to be anxious the day before your race. Of course it's going to be nerve-wracking the morning of. So yeah, that exposure therapy part is a really good call out.
All right, number 5 is a benchmark for goal setting. And I might add, they're also free, right? They don't, other than effort and time, they don't cost any money, which is another reason why they're effective, right? So, having that clear snapshot from your time trials really allows you to set those realistic and specific goals. I know, especially when COVID was really raging, I used them a lot with my athletes coming out of that once they were obviously cleared, to know, do they still go for that BQ? If their training cycle, how is it going? How hard do we want to press? Or, green light, red light, yellow light, what does it look like? So, whether it's shaving seconds off your time or maybe you're training for a new distance, all of the information from that is going to be rooted in data, and your benchmark is giving you the best possible data to know what is achievable.
Absolutely. And it's also a callback to our last episode about measuring success as many ways as possible. It's more opportunities to measure that success. Yep. All right, number 6 is motivation. So we know motivation can be a real struggle for folks, but watching your times improve can be incredibly motivating. So these are more opportunities to do that. Every single one of these milestones is a reason to celebrate, and it can also provide lessons. So say you're not always getting faster, you can take that as an opportunity to look for insight to adjust your training moving forward. And that's great, because then you don't have to wait the 8 to 12 weeks for a race to then feel that sort of disappointment perhaps around not reaching a goal. You can sort of modify in real time. And we all know the more motivation you have, the more likely you are to stick to your plan and to your training.
So how do we do those? How do we incorporate these into your training? Now, if you're training with Edge, we put them in for you. You're welcome. Love and hate us as you're listening to this, realizing it may or may not be tomorrow. So first up is going to be regular scheduling. So incorporating your time trials into your training schedule, right? If you have 18 weeks and we think we can rock it every 6 weeks, you're going to get some really great data snapshots. I like to do it at the beginning too, so that we have something to start with. And depending on your sport, your training cycle, it could be, like we said, it could be once a month. It could be at the end of a training block. Again, I like to do it at the beginning and then having it on a periodized amount. I also like doing these after or at the very end of a recovery week, so that we have the opportunity to have slightly more fleshed out legs. So if I have 3 build weeks and 1 recovery week, I will typically put a time trial either in the recovery week or on the Monday or Tuesday after the recovery week is complete. Just consistency, right? Being able to know that those things are coming. It's really going to be the best way of tracking your progress. And don't think that if you don't hit something or it doesn't progress, that it's necessarily a bad thing. Ask yourself why. Have you not heat adapted enough? Did you not sleep the night before? What is it? And like we said, if you're in Run Club, they're programmed in. Love
Yeah, such a good point too about not taking it too personally. You know, these are just moments in time, and so while it does provide a snapshot of how training is going, there are so many other factors that might influence that performance, like heat, humidity, and nutrition, sleep, so on. So again, it's just another way to get those clues.
The thing I always say to athletes about benchmarking, racing, or even time trialing is they're just data points. Like, all we're looking at is gathering data. That's all racing and training is gathering data and trying to compile it in a meaningful way to make a change. But if not everything is going to stack up in a perfect line, and we know that, and the question just becomes why.
Mm-hmm. All right, number 2 is vary the distance. So you can vary the distance of your time trials. And there is something to be said for having that 2-mile or 5K time trial, at week 6 and at week 12, so that you can compare those benchmarks. But if you're training for a different race or in a different season, you can switch those up. So you can do a 10K time trial, you can do a 2-mile time trial, or a 1-mile, or you can even do a half marathon. The only thing I would say about that is, when we get into those longer distances, it's going to be more like a race effort, so our recovery would have to
leaves a mark.
It leaves a bigger mark, yeah. So, but you can definitely switch those up, and if you are on trail, as an example, you could do a trail time trial and come back to that same trail. You have so many options of ways to keep this interesting and still get data points to help your training.
Third way that we can implement these is to analyze the results. So after the time trial, cool down, be chill, and then take time to actually analyze how that went. Look at your pacing, your heart rate, how you felt throughout the trial. I know Training Peaks has the whole mental rating system, which is really helpful. Mm-hmm. After that, I would use a pace calculator to really update any pace card. So maybe you raced a certain way, but that you probably could have gone 10 seconds faster per mile. Put that range in there and extrapolate it for all of the different distances in your pace card. Make notes on things like it's a great opportunity to test out your gear. Put notes about what you ate that day. If you had a really great race, a really great time trial, and you had a burrito from Chipotle with easy on the beans or whatever that is, put that in there, because that can become part of how you race. And that analysis really provides insights into any areas that you might want to improve.
Do you have any athletes who pre-fuel with burritos?
I have a couple Chipotle athletes.
Yeah.
But what we say is go easy on the beans. But it is it's salty. Mm-hmm. You've got carbs, you've got protein, and you can control how much fiber is in there. And if you're traveling, more than likely you're going to have something like that.
Yeah, I laugh because I have an athlete who lives on it, so I get it.
Get
I didn't know it was a thing.
Cards, yeah.
If you want to sponsor this episode. And number 4 is to integrate recovery. So time trials are intense, and while a 5K or 2-mile time trial isn't going to leave as much of a mark, if you go up in distance, you're going to need to build in that recovery, as we mentioned before. So if you're putting in that race effort, it's a great time actually to dial in that race recovery and see how quickly you can bounce back, which is also another great way to see where you're at in terms of fitness.
Yep.
And it's important to build in this rest and recovery phase after one of these efforts. Why?
Because fitness is only actualized through the recovery phase. We try to work that in as much as possible.
Nailed it.
It's crazy though on this one, because if you are benchmarking and time trialing, and let's say you're stacking the bricks the way that they can optimally be stacked, mm-hmm. when you time trial, you are getting better at it, which means it's leaving more of a mark, which makes recovery important. But also, you may get a faster pace card, which makes recovery even more important, because you're going to get a shiny new pace card that's going to have you be working a little bit harder in the subsequent training phase.
Yeah, and that's pretty cool to see.
Yep.
All right, to recap, so time trials can be a really valuable tool in your training toolbox. They can give you a measure of your progress, help you develop mental resilience and toughness, and help by optimizing those pacing strategies. And by regularly incorporating time trials into your training, you can really unlock new levels of performance and achieve those endurance goals.
So, get ready. Edge athletes and beyond, lace up your training shoes, hop on your bike, jump in the pool, race against the clock. Your future self will thank you. We promise. Till next time.
Thanks for listening to Coach Quip. Original music performed by Ment. follow us online on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Edge Athlete Lounge. Our podcast lives in the blog section of our website. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast, and you can check out the show notes for additional ways to contact us. Ready, set, onward we go.